Hi. I'm Arthur, and this is part 3 in a 20-part series I am doing covering fan-favorite successor chapters of Space Marines in order of the Legions. Do you need to have seen the other parts to understand this one? No, but it would make me happy. I'm just gonna cut to the chase here and say, hey, did you know that there is a mostly confirmed Loyalist successor chapter of the Emperor's Children that no one ever talks about at all? They have been around for a very long time too, 20-30 years at this point, and their original paint scheme is most certainly inspired by the Emperor's Children in one way or another. The Death Eagles have a bit of a sordid history and have been brought up not as often as I personally think they are worth, because they are worth a lot more attention than they actually get. But there is this thing that I think happens a lot when it comes to stuff that existed in the Rogue Traders era of 40k, where at a certain point they retcon a faction but don't mention if the retcon is canon in universe or outside of the universe. Good example. How the Minotaurs of this image here became the Minotaurs of this image here is only scantly recalled, and I believe it is implied in lore that the original Minotaurs have actually just been a separate chapter that died off, and this new one took its place. Now, a lot of people say this is a more conspiratorial way of looking at it, but it happens more often than you'd think. Replacements for chapters, that is. I'm going somewhere with this, but before I do, I just want to thank my channel members for supporting me. I've been having to deal with some financial issues lately, especially with me having to move, find a better spot to live, and so on and so forth. But with your continued support, I can do this whole video makey bullshit indefinitely, which is nice. So if you want to support me and my content, as well as gain access to additional content, then become a channel member today. I'd really appreciate it. So yeah, there is a lot of retcons that occur that can cause a lot of weirdness to happen in the setting. One of my favorites is not so much an above-universe retcon as it is an in-universe retcon, where the Star Scorpions were a corrupted chapter of Space Marines that became a warband known as the Pure, and because of this, they were replaced by a new chapter of a different name by the name of the Mentor Legion. They retained the same chapter number, as well as the same color scheme of the original chapter. This is addressed only once or twice in the entirety of the fiction, but I do think it's very interesting. So when it comes to chapters like the Death Eagles, there is this idea of the before and after. So in the original days, as I was mentioning, they had pink, white, and gold as a color scheme, which was actually really cool. Also kind of reminds me of, oh, hey, wait a second, these are the same colors. GW, are you cooking something over there? Somebody better tell that Ember Phoenix lad that the OG Death Eagles actually might be the origination of the gene seed that led to the Primaris only chapter of the Sons of Phoenix, which is really funny. Because, well, if I had a nickel for every time there was a faction that had a pink, white, and gold color scheme, as well as being suspected of being a successor of Loyalist Emperor's Children, I would have exactly 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that that happened twice. So yeah, what are their origins? Shrouded in mystery. This chapter is a bit odd that way. So what we can at least marginally confirm is in the Horus Heresy, there was a group of Black Shields. Now, Black Shields are small companies of individuals who either defected silently from the sides of their cause and weren't officially aligned to, say, either Horus or the Emperor, or a group that defected and banded together to make their own mercenary group for the conflict itself. So yeah, there was a group of Loyalist Emperor's Children that named themselves the Death Eagles to kind of reinforce their loyalties to the Emperor and not their prior legion. Their paint scheme is widely considered to have been the one seen in the original part of this video, the pink, white, and gold here, which is the original chapter of Death Eagles from the Rogue Trader book, which I think is very interesting. But eventually, along the way, you will notice a switch. Now, in my research, it's never mentioned when the switch happened, just that this became this, and this became this. So they are now considered a Raven Guard successor, and because of this, they are treated kind of weirdly by others. They were also a part of that event that happened, and has a rather significant name, but absolutely no lore to it. That name is in fact the War of the False Primarch. No, we don't know who the False Primarch is. We just know that the Pentarchy of Blood was 5 chapters of especially violent Space Marines, and oh my god, Red Talons, hi! how are you? It's been so... the Death Eagles were a part of that, and they were sent in that pentarchy of blood formation to go fight 11 different Space Marine chapters, which they won somehow, and then scoured the planets of those original Space Marine chapters. They are a bit of a hidden kind of chapter, similar to a lot of Raven Guard successors. It's common with the idea of, say, them being either Emperor's Children or Raven Guard is kind of up in the air, because there's not much writing about them. My personal theory is that this version of the Death Eagles are Raven Guard. The name was just picked up by someone. It's common for names to be repeated in the 40k setting without anybody really knowing. I mean, hey, Gabriel Seth, what's the name of your Eviscerator? Oh, the Blood Reaver? Neat. Hey, Huron Blackheart, what's your title in the Maelstrom? Oh, it's the Blood Reaver. Also neat. But also the name Death Eagles isn't that unique, so it makes sense. But I do think that this color scheme of Death Eagles were a chapter of Space Marines that were at least tangentially related to the Emperor's Children. Maybe they were related to the Black Shield group from the Horus Heresy, but again, we don't really have a major confirming Thrand to put them in there. But I like to think that they existed as a Black Shield group into the Scouring and somehow blended in. It was hinted at a certain point that the original Black Shield group died at the hands of the original Emperor's Children in sort of a crossfire fight between the remaining loyalists and the remaining traitors. But the thing I want to link together is that the Sons of the Phoenix chapter use an almost identical paint scheme in terms of coloration, and also have a similar lineage. So I'm thinking that because the Sons of the Phoenix are an Ultima founding only chapter, and were created by Call himself, I think he got the gene seed for this chapter specifically from the Death Eagles from the Black Shield's warband that existed before. It is heavily implied that Call has indeed used Traitor Gene Seed to create new Marines, and the sources of Traitor Gene Seed that has been uncorrupted and untainted is limited at best and destroyed at worst. So capturing relatively untainted Emperor's Children and then working on their Gene Seed to see why they weren't corrupted and then recreating it to become Primaris Gene Seed is not out of the realm of possibility. Call does possess the means to capture Space Marines and use them for experiments, so it's not out of the question, but it would be an interesting way to link the two chapters, or rather the one chapter and the one Black Shield together, because it's very interesting to see these individual strands and how they can be tied together. I honestly don't think it's a coincidence that the Sons of the Phoenix and the Death Eagles have almost identical coloration. Now, the schemes themselves and the patterns that they have are not exactly the same, but the colors are almost identical last I checked. And identical colorations are common enough that you can point at a few chapters and go, hey, that's similar, but not common enough for you to look at many chapters and go, yeah, they look the same. Most Ultramarine successors are not exactly the same colors, if you catch my drift. Storytelling-wise, it would make for an interesting novel. I know, I mentioned them before, but the Mentor Legion had their lineage traced back to Guilliman in a book once upon a time. That was actually pretty interesting as to how they went about it, so seeing them link up with another successor of the Ultramarines was very interesting. So in all of this rambling discourse that I'm going on here, is it possible that any of this is true? Probably not, but it is fun to speculate. A phrase I use a lot for my channel, and the thing I want to drive home, is interpretation over regurgitation. In the 40k community, especially the lore community, there is this tendency to produce a one-for-one recreation of the lore so that other people can pick it up and go with it. There are some people who do it fantastically and some people who do it less so. Some people just read the wikis and some people read all the books and give out the information. I have friends across the spectrum and I think they all do a great job, but on my channel, I don't think I have the capacity to be able to infer the lore to you in a way that is on par with them. So my strength here is I think that you as a thinking person have a brain enough to see the lore and come up with your own ideas. I'm not saying that your ideas should interfere with canon or that you shouldn't create your own homebrew stuff. But your interpretation of the facts that you get is way more important than just you reading it from a book and then just having that knowledge at the back of your head as like a trivia fact. So linking the two versions of the Death Eagles together, there is not many threads that connect them, but it is an interesting way to look at them from a different light. If you look at the Primarch series that I'm doing right now, which if you're watching this relatively recently, I would have just covered Fulgrim, which is a good companion piece to watch this, is doing exactly what I'm discussing, where instead of simply regurgitating the lore, I'm trying to go at it from a different perspective and give you guys different talking points to discuss these characters from, because everybody's discussed them from the same point of view. Everybody's said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if the Sons of the Phoenix were Emperor's children? But I don't think anybody discusses other ways that that could be represented. So I want to provide everybody with that kind of jumping off point. And I believe all of you are smart enough to figure that out on your own and have your own kind of discussion on the matter. So again, I prioritize interpretation over regurgitation. And even if you're proven wrong, what's the worst that could happen? You're just wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. So, most of what I said about the Death Eagles in terms of my interpretation is probably going to be incorrect. But might be interesting if it turned out to be at least partially correct. But that's just me going off on a tangent to let you know why I tend to try and cover these more obscure chapters. One of my crowning achievements in my mind, and one of my favorite videos, you might want to go back and watch it or not, is a video I did on the Marauders. The Marauders have about a paragraph of lore, but have existed since the early days of Warhammer. They have very few lore, and we know almost nothing about them, but I still found a way to talk about them because I interpret singular details that we have about them in a way that I think you all would find interesting, and I'm going to be doing that for every chapter I find until I run out of chapters, and then I'll probably just take homebrew suggestions and then just like shit on them or whatever. But once again, that is me going off on a tangent. What do you all think about the Death Eagles? Do you think they are honestly a chapter divided in two? Do you think they are just a retcon by GW in order to minimize canon issues between the Rogue Trader days, the Horus Heresy, and now? I want to know. Let me know in the comments. I genuinely enjoy this kind of discourse so that we can discuss these theories and build upon them. Alongside that, remember to like and subscribe as it helps the channel a lot. Thanks once again for watching, and yeah, I got no end joke this time. I just want to make a small comment that I really wish more Space Marine color schemes have like that kind of pastel pink that they've been using with these two schemes. I think it's really nice. And I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but damn, these schemes go hard.